Moving on to my same segment I had from last week, legit or quit. Are these storylines coming out of week one legit, or do you need to slow down a little bit? And we're going to talk about the team that I just talked about in the last segment, the Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins are going to make the playoffs. I think that is 100% legit. I think the Miami Dolphins are a very good team. I think they are a top 7 team or so in the league, arguably top 5 team in the league. The offense has shown what they can do. The offense was the question coming into the season. The offense exploded with Waddle, with Hill, 11 catches, both over 170 yards, both with 2 touchdowns. Tua, 470 yards, 6 touchdowns. Tua did his job. The receivers did their jobs. The defense didn't have the best of games. But when the offense can pick up the slack, which has never been able to do so, when we had Brian Flores, has never been able to do so with Tua as a quarterback, we finally got to see the offense carry the load when the defense isn't having a good game, because the defense isn't always going to have good games. Sometimes the defense is going to struggle, and they're allowed to struggle. They're a top 8 defense in the league. They get the opportunity to say, you know what, we had a blunder of a game. We got you next week. And hopefully next week they will come against the Buffalo Bills. But how the offense is looking and how good we know the defense is, we won 2 out of our first 4 games already. We were 2-2 is where we wanted to be. We're 2-0. I think the Dolphins are making the playoffs this year easily. But the Dolphins are going to rival the Bills for the AFC East. Quit. Let's slow down on that. Miami Dolphins played really well. They've done just about everything right. They won in 2 very different fashions. They won by dominating the Patriots at home, controlled the lead the entire game, and then they won from behind after playing a really bad first half, playing against the Ravens, coming back to win that game. They won 2 very different ways, and they looked really good in that game. Let's slow down. We're putting everything together right now. This is the first year that everything is really being put together. The Buffalo Bills have had that for years now. The Bills, Josh Allen, have been a near finished product, are really a few plays away from probably making the Super Bowl. I think they would have beat Cincinnati. But you never know, of course, but I think they would have. The Bills are very close to being the best team in the league if they already aren't. The Bills are certainly the best team in the AFC, and I think they will handle themselves as such as the season goes on. They played, the time everybody watching this, they played yesterday on Monday Night Football. I don't know how that game went, but I'm going to assume they won. I'm going to predict that they won. And then going into next week, the Bills are going to be favored in Miami, even though Miami played as great as they did on Sunday. The Bills are still going to be favored, and the Bills are definitely still favored for the division. That's obviously be great if we competed for the AFC East. That'd be fantastic if we won the AFC East. Let's slow down. The Bills are the best team in the AFC. Let's quit on that storyline. The Colts are a bad team. Is there anybody out here that wouldn't tell me that's legit? The Colts are a terrible football team, and it's actually pretty easy to see what's going on there. They are so one-dimensional. Even when they have Michael Pittman. They didn't have Michael Pittman, of course, yesterday against the Jacksonville Jaguars. They didn't have Michael Pittman yesterday. They only had Jonathan Taylor. They only had the best running back in the game, arguably. But when Pittman's there, you know what they're going to do. They're going to funnel the ball to either Taylor or Pittman as much as humanly possible. There is no other 3rd, 4th, 5th options that you can look at and feel good about. I think Alec Pierce is his name, is their 2nd receiver on the team. Has he done anything this year? Has a handful of catches, nothing spectacular at all. Noelle Cox is a very mid at best tight end. Naheem Hines is okay. And Matt Ryan is at a point of his career where this year he's not going to be carrying anybody. He doesn't have the athletic ability. His arm is in a much weakened state from what it once was. And this Colts team is in serious trouble. They just got blanked by the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I would like to give a little credit to the Jacksonville Jaguars because Trevor Lawrence looked very good yesterday. James Robinson, which was a concern for a lot of people, a lot of fantasy owners, 64 yards and a touchdown, has some work in the receiving game. Trevor Lawrence, 25 of 30, 235 and 2 touchdowns. Trevor Lawrence is turning into the quarterback we thought he could be. We know he's athletic. We know he has a good arm. We know he's mobile. We know he's poised. And they put on a clinic yesterday. 24-0 in their first, just in the first 3 quarters alone, the Colts had nothing going on. So the Colts are most certainly a bad football team. The Dallas Cowboys, after beating the Cincinnati Bengals, are just fine without Dak Prescott. All right, slow down. Cowboys fans, we know we're going to, I know in the back, I'm going to start hearing some Cowboys fans saying, see, we're fine. Cooper Rush is a good quarterback. Cooper Rush is the answer. 235 yards and a touchdown. Cowboys are still a bad team. They controlled the first 3 quarters, first 2.5 quarters of that game, really. And the Bengals, who looked terrible. Joe Mixon, 57 yards on the ground. Joe Burrow has not looked himself. And we'll see how that plays out for the Bengals the rest of the season. However, the Cowboys still are going to miss the playoffs. The Cowboys, best case scenario is Dak misses like 3 or 4 weeks, which I think is very unrealistic. The Cowboys are not fine with Cooper Rush. They're going to play better, more informed teams coming up on their schedule. Yeah, it was a good win to beat the Bengals, to beat the Super Bowl runner-up, but the Cowboys, it's not going to be like this for the rest of the season as long as Cooper Rush is their quarterback. And even then, they have way more problems. The offensive line is not that good. Zeke is a shell of what he once was, and it's crazy because he theoretically should be in the prime of his career. CeeDee Lamb hasn't had the sharpest of starts, and still being coached by Mike McCarthy. Jerry Jones still being in charge of the organization. The Cowboys are not back. The Cowboys are not fine with how everything is currently going. This new Broncos team isn't clicking. That's legit. This Broncos team, there's something wrong with this team, and there's multiple things you could point at and say this is probably it. That's probably it. I would like to point at there's so many new pieces on this team right now. Arguably your best player on defense, Randy Gregory, just joined the team in the offseason. Your quarterback just joined the team this offseason, even though I'm a big Russell Wilson supporter. And I think Russell Wilson is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. It's going to take some time. And oh, by the way, you still have the fact that this is a first-year head coach, Nathaniel Hackett. We saw how he blundered the Seahawks game. And we saw how the Broncos really had no footing in the game yesterday whatsoever. Eric Saubert, only touchdown of the game, as on a 22-yard pass from Russell Wilson. They have time, thankfully. Thankfully for them, it is the beginning of the season, and they have time. What is not to be thankful, if you're a Denver Broncos fan, is, oh, by the way, you have to play the Chargers, the Chiefs, and the Raiders. Raiders haven't looked good, but you do have to do that. And if you look at their schedule, let's look at the Broncos' schedule coming up here. They play the 49ers next week. I'm not a doctor, but I don't think there's any chance Trey Lance is playing that game, so you're going to get Jimmy Garoppolo, so you probably are favored in that matchup. And then you get to play the Raiders, who absolutely choked that game on Sunday against the Cardinals. And then you get to play the Colts. So and beyond that, you get to play the Chargers, who may not have Lamar Jackson. You'll 100% play the Chargers without Lamar Jackson. I can guarantee that. Probably going to play the Chargers without Justin Herbert, and then the Jets, the Jaguars, the Titans. Wow. Looking at this now, the Broncos, this is about as good of a situation the Broncos can possibly have for struggling like they have. They have time. They have favorable matchups coming up in these next few weeks. And it makes sense. They finished 4th in their division last year, so they're going to get a 4th place schedule. Getting to play the Jets, the Jaguars, the Titans, the Raiders, the Panthers, all in a large stretch of games through the middle of their season. It is very favorable if you're a Broncos fan, and I do believe the Broncos will eventually come around. That is legit, but it is also legit that there's something wrong. It's hard to point out exactly what it is because there's so much talent on both sides of the ball. The running game should be the best, if not best, top 3, top 5 running back core in the league. Sutton and Judy got hurt yesterday, but they should be one of the best wide receiver duos in the league. Very good offensive line, very good defense, and Russell Wilson as their quarterback. There's so much to like there that it's so hard to point out what's not going on, but there's definitely something not clicking with the Denver Broncos. The Cardinals and the Packers have not answered, the Cardinals and the Packers have answered their questions. Stop it. They haven't. The Cardinals and the Packers there's still a lot of questions for me for both those two teams. Packers, Sunday Night Football, doing what they do every single season. beating the Chicago Bears. That's just a formality at this point. And the Bears, give them a little bit of credit. The Bears hung in that game a lot longer than most probably expected. That's a touchdown at the end. Not conclusive enough. I saw somebody draw a line from the one side of the goal line to the other, and it was like line, little hump, line. Like, oh yeah, of course that's not a touchdown. That was a touchdown. I get, yeah, it wasn't clear and obvious. That was a touchdown, and who knows what happens them pulling within one score at that point. What happens the remainder of the game? And then you have the Cardinals, who struggled mightily against the Raiders, forced overtime and won it thanks to a fumble return for a touchdown, Hunter Renfrow putting the rock on the ground. And the Cardinals are in a rough spot too. The Cardinals have not answered all their questions. Kyler Murray, 31-49, 277, and a touchdown. They can't run the ball. They cannot run the ball, and that's something that's very concerning for James Conner fantasy owners and for Arizona Cardinals fans, is they really struggle to run the ball. The offensive line is not good. The offensive line is a really big problem there. Zach Ertz had himself a good game, 8 catches, 75 yards. Hollywood Brown hasn't gotten involved like a lot of people thought he would. James Conner's not doing well. They really need DeAndre Hopkins back. That's going to be a very welcoming return to the team. But there's still a lot wrong with these two teams, the Cardinals and the Packers. They're both long ways away from being contenders. They're also a pretty decent way from being playoff teams. I mean, I'm looking at many teams in the NFC that look better. I have a bigger belief in the 49ers, certainly the Rams. The Falcons are the best 0-2 team in football. Should have won last week against the Saints. Pushed the Rams all the way to the end, only losing by 31-27. Bucks and Saints was by no means a barn burner, but you know those are two good teams. And a team I'm going to talk about in a second, the Detroit Lions, has looked really good for the first two games. 1-1, but putting up 30-plus points in both games. There is something wrong with the Cardinals and the Packers, and they have not answered their questions. And finally, last one, the Detroit Lions are a good football team. That is legit. I'm so happy to see the Detroit Lions succeeding like they have. I'm also very happy on the other side for the Washington Commies. Carson Wentz has been looking really good yesterday. 337 yards, 3 touchdowns, did have an interception. But Jared Goff is, if nothing else, efficient. 256 yards, 4 touchdowns. Rushing game wasn't really there for him, but you know who was? Amon St. Brown, which I really like on my 2 fantasy teams. Should have taken him in all 3, had the opportunity to, but I didn't. But the Lions are looking legit. Dan Campbell is proving a lot of people wrong. Dan Campbell, he's not an X's and O's guy. He's just a rah-rah. He's a good face of the franchise. He's a good leader. But people are saying that kind of as an insult. But what he's done is he's hired smart around him. We saw in Hard Knocks, the assistant coaches around him appear to know what they're doing. Very smart, something that they really emphasize. They're a very gritty football team, and there's belief there. We haven't seen belief in the Detroit Lions organization outside of a few years with Matt Stafford, really ever in most of our lifetimes. But now there's belief. The Detroit Lions, I hate to say it, my friend Kyle might be right. The Detroit Lions can very much be a playoff team. Maybe that's what I should have had the headline as. It's legit. The Detroit Lions may as well be a playoff team. They're playing better than the Packers. They're playing better than the Cardinals. Their offense is looking good. Oddly enough, their defense is struggling a little bit. Trey Hendrickson. The FAU on the mind. Aiden Hutchinson, he's played really well so far. The rookies. There's been quite a few good rookies to start off this season across the NFL, and Aiden Hutchinson has looked good. The Detroit Lions, man, I might say that the Detroit Lions they're definitely a top 20 team. Are they top 18? Are they top 15? I don't know. We'll see. They did play the Jaguars and the Commies in the first 2 weeks. So maybe I'm getting a little giddy. Maybe I'm looking a little too far ahead and projecting on what I think they will be. But I really like the Detroit Lions. I really like the way they are going. And I think they are actually a very good football team. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Legit or Quit.